Welcome to today's edition of Weathering the Storms of Life with the Rains. It's Rob Rains, Sally Tippett Rains with you here from STLSportsPage.com's home office studio here as we continue another day of staying at home. Also putting these quizzes up on rainbowsforkids.org.
Under the Choose Happy blog.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the 1990s today.
That was a fun decade, but we were talking about that earlier, and though you've covered the Cardinals and baseball for years, the 90s was one year when you weren't actually based in St. Louis.
Yeah, no, we spent a lot of time out of town. We actually started the decade of the 90s living in Fort Myers, Florida. I was working for a team called the Fort Myers Sun Sox. I was the PR director. It was a senior league team, a lot of former ex-major league
Mike
players.
Ramsey was on that team.
Yeah, a couple of Pat Dobson was the manager. They tried to get that league going with the former players and lasted about a year and a half, but that was all
But
they
that
could
was fun.
make it work. So that was fun, and we left there when I got a job at Baseball Weekly to cover the National League when it started in 1991. Was one of the founding writers at USA Today Baseball Weekly. It's now Sports Weekly. So we lived in the Washington D.C. area for a number of years, and then lo and behold, went and moved to Arizona for a year to take a job I was teaching. I got a grant from the Freedom Forum to teach sports writing for a year at Arizona State University. So we lived in Scottsdale for a year. So we kind of bounced around a little bit.
But we got back to St. Louis just in time for Mark McGuire's exciting
all the
run.
highlight of the 90s. We do a lot of book projects, a couple things with him during that home run record chase, a couple kids' books, as well as an adult biography, and didn't do a lot of the day-to-day stuff with the Cardinals in the 90s, but saw a lot of baseball games. Saw a lot of Cardinal games, too. But as we were talking earlier, too, the Cardinals were not as successful a team in the 90s as they were in some of the other decades, so there weren't many postseason games to cover. So you got some words of wisdom for us before we get started with the questions?
Yes, I chose today is the first day of the rest of your life. And I was thinking about that saying, and it was on the Total cereal commercial. I don't know if you remember. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Started out with Total, so some of you my age might remember that. But and Total was the company that had the Mikey He'll Eat Anything
I
cereal.
do remember those.
But anyway, I wondered if their advertising department came up with the saying or who it was, and actually it was the first known person that said today is the first day of the rest of your life. It was in 1978, and it was a guy in California that was running a place for alcoholics and drug addicts.
Rehab place.
Yes, and so anyway, I just thought that was a great one to do because every day we have a chance to make this day great, and we also have a chance to screw up. And the great thing about it is when you wake up tomorrow, it's another day. It's the first day of the rest of your life. So try to make today a great day. And if it doesn't go the way you want it to, then when you wake up tomorrow with a fresh new start, you can make it.
Yeah, I think that's especially relevant right now because everybody basically considers every day like Groundhog Day because we're just so many things that we still got a couple weeks left. That stay-at-home orders are still in place in St. Louis County, so you have that choice.
You do have a choice. And I mean, it just, you all know it. You're watching the news. First, we're hearing the bad news about the pandemic, and then we're hearing all this bad news about crime, and it's unbelievable. We're in unprecedented times, as they say. So we have to save ourselves. We have to be the ones that have the attitude of we're going to have a good life no matter what all these other crazies are doing.
So we're going to ask you 10 questions about the 1990s. We'll go through the questions and come up with the answers. So you can either jot down your answers as we move along, or you can just play along with us and think of them in your head, and then we'll go back and review the answers. So hopefully everybody's been enjoying these quizzes as we move from decade to decade.
I've been enjoying the quizzes.
Yeah. We got some nice comments from some people out there who are watching and listening along, so we appreciate that very much.
Yeah, we do appreciate knowing that people are actually watching them.
All right, you want to get started with question one?
Question one. Before Mark McGuire's record-setting 70 home run season in 1998, who held the Cardinals' record for the most home runs in a season? He had 43.
Yeah,
That's a big
I
difference.
think McGuire broke that record by the All-Star break almost, yeah. So, question two. In Mark McGuire's two big years in St. Louis, that was 1998 and 1999, the Cardinals also had another player on each team, each of those 2 years, who finished with more than 30 home runs, which normally would have been a big total for that for the Cardinals over the years. So one player, two different players. One player did it in 98, one player did it in 99. Who were those two players?
Number three, when Mark McGuire hit his 62nd home run on September 8th, 1998 to break Roger Maris's single-season record, another Cardinal made his major league debut as a pinch hitter that night. Who was it?
And we were talking earlier, we had a church function the night of that 60-second home run. It was a meeting at our church, and we were.
They were taking a vote, so they
Mhm.
really wanted you to be there. So we went ahead and went. And I remember Mrs. Carlisle had her TV set up on a little TV tray. Everybody was watching it.
Yeah.
Of course, we missed it when we walked out. We walked out to the car, and there it happened. There it went.
Yeah. As I say, luckily I wasn't doing day-to-day stuff, so I didn't necessarily have to be at the ballpark then. Question 4, who had the Cardinals' longest hitting streak of the decade of the 1990s? It was a 25-game hitting streak set by this player in 1999. Who had the 25-game hitting streak for the Cardinals in 1999?
When Mark Whiten hit 4 home runs in the second game of a doubleheader in Cincinnati on September 7th, 1993, how many RBIs did he get in that game?
That was question 5. Question 6. Fernando Tatis is well known for hitting 2 grand slams in the same inning, both off of Chan-Ho Park in a game at Dodger Stadium. The date was April 23rd, 1999. How many other grand slams did Fernando Tatis hit in his couple years with the Cardinals? How many other grand slams, other than the 2 that came in the 1 inning, did he hit in his Cardinal career?
Question 7. One Cardinal pitcher threw a no-no in the 1990s, and the Cardinals were no-hit once during the decade. Can you name both pitchers?
Question 8. During the decade, the Cardinals had 5 different players who started at first base on opening day during the decade. How many of those 5 can you name? The 5 different opening day starting first basemen for the Cardinals in the decade of the 1990s.
Question 9. The Cardinals had 4 managers in the 1990s, 3 of whom later were elected to the Hall of Fame. They had another one who was not elected to the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to say who the 3 that were elected because maybe it would give it away. So,
Okay.
well, no, then you have to say them all. Okay. You're trying to guess the 4th one. The 3 pitchers that they had in the 90s out of 4 was Whitey Herzog, Joe Torre, and Tony La Russa.
So who also managed the team? It was in between the time that Torre got fired in 95 and La Russa arriving. 96 games he managed the team in 1995, technically as the interim manager. And then question 10, the Cardinals' only playoff appearance of the decade came in 1996. They beat the Padres in the division series, but then lost to the Braves in the NLCS, getting beat 15-0 in Game 7. Who was the Cardinals' starting pitcher in that game? Game 7 of the 1996 NLCS, their only playoffs season during the decade of the 1990s.
Now we're going to start back with the answers.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of Mark McGwire questions at the beginning. And I wanted to point out that with all the games you've covered, both of the Mark McGwire things you missed.
72.
And the other one was due to a charity event that you had confirmed that you would be at. And then it turns out it's going to be the night that he could possibly hit it. We were telling about that one.
It was the final day of the season, yeah. And as I say, the Cardinals weren't going to win the playoffs, so there really wasn't a whole lot of other interest in that team. So I had committed to the hospital bed races. I think it was some kind of a fundraiser charity down in Soulard. So
you were racing against Mike Miller from KMOX.
Did not win, as I recall, but it was
a fun event. But it was a fun event until we heard.
It was close enough to the ballpark that we could hear the cheers when he hit the home run. Yeah.
And everybody heard it, and we're like, oh, we missed it.
All right, question 1. The answer: who hit the most home runs in the Cardinal history at 43 before Mark McGwire came along? That was Johnny Mize in 1940.
Number 2, in McGwire's 2 big years, 98 and 99, the Cardinals had another player in each season with more than 30 homers, a different player each year. Who were they?
Ray Langford hit 31 homers in 98. Fernando Tatis, 34 in 1999. The player who made his Major League debut the same night that McGwire broke Roger Maris's record was J.D. Drew.
Question 4. Who had the Cardinals' longest hitting streak in the decade of the 90s? A streak of 25 games in 1999.
Wasn't Big Mac, it was.
Little Mac. It was Joe McEwing. Everyone liked him and nicknamed him Little Mac.
He's gone on to be a successful coach at the big league level. Question 5, Mark Whiten's 4 home run games also resulted in 12 RBIs, which tied the franchise record set by Sonny Jim Bottomley in a game in 1924.
Number 6, Fernando Tatis is well known for hitting 2 grand slams in the same inning, both off Chan-Ho Park in a game at Dodger Stadium, April 23rd, 1999. How many other grand slams did he hit during his years with the Cardinals? He hit 3.
And one later that year in 98 and 99 and 2 in 2000. So The two no-hitters the Cardinals were involved with in the decade of the 90s, the one thrown by their pitcher was Jose Jimenez. He beat the Diamondbacks in Phoenix June 25th, 1999, and they were no-hit by the Dodgers, Fernando Valenzuela, on June 29th, 1990 at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles.
Okay. During the decade, the Cardinals had 5 different players start at first base on opening day. Tell us
Those
all
5 in
about
order
them.
were Pedro Guerrero in 1990 and 1991, Andres Galarraga, 1992, very short-lived Cardinal career, and he was hurt for most of it, but he was there on opening day. Greg Jeffries was the starting first baseman in 93 and 94. John Mabry did it for 3 years in a row, 95, 96, 97. And then, of course, McGuire arrived at the end of 97. He was the opening day first baseman in 98 and 99.
And question 9, I kind of screwed up when I was asking it. Very simple question. The Cardinals had 4 managers in the 1990s, 3 of whom were elected to the Hall of Fame: Whitey Herzog, Joe Torre, and Tony La Russa, who also managed the team technically as an interim manager for 96 games in 1995 after Torre was fired.
It was Mike Jorgensen, who at the time was the director of player development, running the farm club, and had been a AAA manager before, so he took over that team on an interim basis. And question 10, Cardinals' only postseason appearance in the decade, 1996. They got to the NLCS where they got beat 15-0 by the Braves in Game 7. Starting pitcher that day was Donovan Osborne, who unfortunately didn't get out of the first inning. We got 2 outs, gave up 6 runs as the Braves went on to beat the Cardinals and advance to the World Series. And that, when the Cardinals had that big first inning in the final game in Atlanta last year, everybody kind of said it was the comeback for that game in '96, because that's what the Braves had done to them.
So as the
did well
90s
all in
closed, you moved back to St. Louis,
Yeah,
back, and you
back
started covering on a regular basis the Cardinals. And so our next decade is the 2000s.
Yeah, did a lot. Probably did more radio work in the 2000s, working at KMOX, doing post-game shows and stuff, than I did actually writing, but still there at the ballpark on a pretty regular basis. So we'll have that quiz for you next day here on stlsportspage.com, also rainbowsforkids.org. Thanks for tuning in.